Hello. So this is my part of our breakdown of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Let's begin. So about Gabrielle Zevin. She is quite like one of our main characters, Sam. Both of them are biracial, Sam being American Jewish Korean and Zevin being a Korean Jew. And she kind of shares that experience and kind of like explores that throughout the novel. She highlights moments where Sam doesn't really feel like he belongs to one culture. Is he Jewish? Is he Korean? Is he American? And especially in Koreatown, he kind of feels more at home. He feels like he's just among different people and he can really just like be himself. And then also, she went to Harvard during the 1990s, which is also the same time period that Sam went to Harvard in the book. And that also just like allows for a deeper level of understanding about the setting in Harvard. Although the setting at Harvard wasn't really the majority of the novel, the majority of the novel was in the West Coast. However, she also lived in California as well as Harvard, so she was able to expand the setting based on her own personal experiences. And then also, I researched about why exactly she wrote about video games because it's a very niche topic that maybe someone who doesn't develop video games themselves might not be that interested in. And so I was interested in why she chose video games for the topic of this book. And so I found that she's been a player since childhood, and she was raised by a computer programmer father. And she said in a couple interviews that she really wanted to explore the art of games and how they are built, how they're not just entertainment, but they're a narrative. They have themes, they have a whole plot, and you go through this like kind of just story. And you're more, it's less like a movie or a book where you read about something, but you are the character. And I think she really wanted to explore that. And then she also had some inspirations because she grew up in the indie game scene where there was like smaller groups of programmers making these games instead of large scale corporations. And so she wanted to explore that because she grew up in that time period. And then also, she wanted to break stereotypes. She wanted to show part of her character, especially Sadie, growing up in a time period where women in STEM weren't exactly represented. In the book, Sadie is like one of maybe two girls in her computer programming class at MIT. And she also struggles with maintaining the credit that she put into the video games that she puts in throughout the book. So Gabrielle Zevin really wanted to write about the stereotypes and break them concerning women in STEM and women making video games. All right, and then I touched on a little bit of this, but the historical context of the novel is that it was during the big gaming boom in the 1990s and 2000s. The gaming industry changed like drastically during this time period. It was a rise in the PC gaming, early console wars, and definitely a shift in graphics. So graphics became a lot better, and just instead of like more pixelated, it was a more immersive world, more realistic. And so that's also shown a lot of times in the novel when at the very end, Sadie and Sam were talking about how, oh, if we were born in a different time period like before, would it have been easier? Would it have been, or would it have been harder to make a game? Because if you think about it, if you're born later, it's more of like, there's more work to go to put into this like heavily realistic world in these like drastically realistic games that were made later on. And I think that's like the difference between the 1990s and the 2000s. And I think that that historical context is definitely shown in the book because they often talk about how they said that they might have been a different experience making a game like Ichigo, their first game, and then making a game like Counterpart High. It's more immersive. There's better graphics, and they talk about remaking Ichigo, and at the very end to just like have it more like that graphics correct to the time period, and just I think that's very common for games during that time too to get a revamp. And then also some other cultural contexts. There's a talk about LGBTQ plus rights and same-sex marriage, especially concerning the death of Marx. There was a lot of uproar surrounding the same-sex marriage or just like marriage in general that it could be with anyone in their game Maple World. And it even got some people who really, really did not like that you could have a same-sex marriage in the game, that they went into the Unfair Games headquarters and brought a gun and wanted to kill Sam, who was Mr. Mazur. And so that's definitely like culturally in the 2000s, early 2000s, that was a new thing. That was like, it definitely wasn't as normalized. And so I think that's definitely a result of Marx's death because they just were just really upset about it. And then we also had representation of women in the gaming industry. That's definitely something that grew. Even Sadie said that she was in Dove's class, which was her professor at MIT when she was doing her computer programming class, when she was doing her gaming development class, and she was like one of very few girls in the class. But then about like I think it was maybe like the time period was like 20 years later, or maybe 10 years later, she was like in her 30s. She ended up subbing in for Dove, and she taught that class for a semester, and she said that the class was now 50-50 women and men. So that just shows like the cultural context of the period during the 1990s of her at MIT, and then later in the 2000s. And then also during this time period was the indie game development, where I think I touched on this earlier, where small teams create innovative and artistic games instead of these large companies creating games that there's a lot of like cross review compared to like indie game development. It's a small team. It's very artistic games, and it's less concerned about money. It's more concerned about making a piece of art. All right, now let's go to the plot. So just describing the overall plot structure, it's non-linear. There's several jumpbacks from the present to a flashback, and this often creates more depth to the characters' histories, such as Sam's mom's death. We know that Sam's mom died, and we know that he was raised by his grandparents, and we know that his dad was in the picture, but we don't really know any of this stuff until around like 3/4 of the way into the book, where he finally describes how his mom died. We knew that was a car wreck, but we didn't know like what road he was going down. We didn't know how it happened, what he felt, the moments leading up to it, the moments what he was feeling after. I think that creates a lot of mystery in the character. And then also how Sadie and Stan meet at the beginning. And I do think that this definitely touches on the theme of destiny and how these things just like happen, and how like each event is like interwoven into what happens next. And I really like this idea of plot. It was a little bit hard to follow at times. I definitely had to look and be like, all right, this is in the past, this is in the future. But it was very clever on how she just like unraveled each moment of the character's life, and I really enjoyed that. All right, now we have conflict. So I think that the main conflict is definitely around Sam and Sadie's relationship. It follows a pattern of collaboration, conflict, separation, and reunion. And it's also very similar in how game development involves continuous iteration and debugging. And Sam and Sadie's relationship required quite a lot of debugging. For a while, he didn't really accept the help that she gave surrounding his injury, and he didn't really want it was really hard for him to say I love you back to her, even in a friendly manner. And I think that this definitely connects to the theme. They learned through all of this conflict, and they restarted several times. They restarted in the 6-year period where they stopped talking when they were 12, and they kind of interlinked back when they were in college. That's another restart. And then a couple years later, when they kind of fell off after Mark's death, and then they came back towards the end of the book. Definitely cycles of collaboration, conflict, separation, and reunion. All right, so now plot elements. There's definitely some plot elements of suspense and surprise. There are some challenges that they experiences in the game development, such as the shooting, the failure of both sides, and disagreements between Sadie and Sam of like what game to book. A lot of times she wanted to make a more artistic game, and he wanted to have something to please the crowd. And then there's also the challenges of Sam's foot. There was suspense around, like, was he going to make it with this foot? Does he have to have it amputated? How is this going to, like, play out? And I think that there's also some mystery in how, I think I also touched on this earlier, on how we knew that Sam's mom died, but we didn't really know how, and we didn't really know why he was living with his grandparents, and so that kind of creates the mystery surrounding a character. And then also there's themes of coincidence and chance because of Sam and Sadie's chance encounter at the subway station, and it definitely like influences the role of fate in the narrative. And then the artistic unity and plot manipulation that Gabrielle Zevin utilizes. So I think that she definitely has a strong artistic unity in the subplots that the characters are contributing to the overarching themes of creativity, connection, and the passage of time. Those are like her major things of each subplot. She touches on each of these subplots very much. She talks about Sadie and Sam's relationship, how their friendship is honestly like one of the things that just like keeps them going, and they love each other, and she doesn't even, and that's the one thing that stays throughout the book, not their parents, not their lovers, not anything like that. It's that friendship that stays the entire book. And then the pacing, the plot manipulation. I think there's definitely a strategic placement of key events, and as well as these key events being placed in a later time in the book than when they really occurred, such as Sam's mom's death. And and I think that again creates the iterative nature of both life and game development. And then also the plot incorporates coincidences, and they serve to enhance the thematic depth rather than manipulate the outcomes artificially, such as Sam and Sadie's subway meeting. All right, so now just a brief plot summary. The plot first starts with Sadie and Sam playing games in the hospital. This is where they meet, and then they kind of have that fallout for a couple years, and then they meet again, and they want to make this video game. and they kind of start in Mark's apartment, and they make this video game, and they're just like keep on going. They're new to the video game industry. They're trying it out. They're seeing what they're good at, what they're bad at, and I think this is just like their fresh new start of friendship. And then the making of Ichigo. Sadie and Dove start dating again because she wanted to get the game engine that Dove had, and this actually leads to a conflict later on in the book. And I already said that they agreed to make a game, and they're making it in the apartment. Okay, now once Ichigo is finally out, they have a big rise of fame. Sam kind of establishes this like crowd personality to promote Ichigo, and it's definitely different than the actual personality that he's had so far in the novel. The personality that he's had so far in the novel is like insecure. He has a low self-worth. His injury makes him very just insecure. He feels like he's not like anyone else. He feels like he's not worth it. He feels like he doesn't want to put his friends down for his injury. He keeps on walking even if it hurts. He always has pain, but he never tells anyone of such pain. And so in the crowd, he develops this charismatic personality, and yes. And now Sadie and Dove's relationship turns for the worse after he just isn't really the best guy, the best boyfriend. He even says it in the future, I was a horrible boyfriend. There's some physical abuse, there's some mental abuse. She's constantly wanting his approval for things, and yeah. All right, now Both Sides. This is a video game that Sadie wanted to make because she had an idea of at one point you're in one world and one point you're in the next, and they moved to California, and Sadie also cut off from Dove. This is like their final breakup, and the game ended up being a failure. There was not very good reviews. Myers Landing, which was Sadie's side, the critics did not like that side, but they actually did like Maple World, which was or Mapletown. I think it was called Mapletown in this game. And that's the world that Sam worked on. And at this time, both sides, Sam and Sadie, weren't really talking a lot because Sam had gotten a amputation surgery. And basically, he wasn't really going to the office that much, and Sadie just thought that he didn't care because he didn't really communicate that he was in pain, that he couldn't really travel to the office that much, so she just didn't think that he was caring. It was a classic miscommunication trope that we also see in the plot, or in the point of view, because she thinks that he doesn't care, but he is talking about how much he's in pain and how much he just wants to be back to normal. And so there's like this miscommunication that you see in both point of views, which I think is how the point of view is used very well. Now, Counterpart High. This is when Simon and Anne, two recent college grads, enter the company, and Sam and Sadie and Mark like lives in the company. I don't know, that sounded really weird. Sorry. And Counterpart High takes off immediately better than Both Sides. Now, Sadie and Sam decide to make Maple World, which is basically it's Both Sides, but without Myers Landing, the side that the critics did not like. And now this really establishes Sam's identity as Mayor Mazer. But also, this strains Sadie and Sam's relationship because Sadie, at this point, is not credited for this game, and she really takes a hit to this. At the start of her video game career, she was like, oh, started with success, Ichigo was so good, I'm not gonna have any more failures after this, and then boom, Both Sides. And then boom, they make Maple World, which is the better version of Both Sides, and so this really takes a hit to her ego. However, they have a promotion trip for Counterpart High, and this kind of begins Sadie's and Sam's romance, or Sadie and Mark's romance, which really strains Sadie and Sadie's relationship even more past the credit that was straining their relationship. And then they come back from Japan and they hide their relationship from Sam, which hurts Sadie and Sam's relationship even more. All right. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. Now, Pioneers. This is where between Maple World and Pioneers is when Mark died, because in Counterpart High, Maple World, they really did not like, I was talking about the people who really did not like how there was same-sex marriage in Maple World. And so Marks dies because of the people who were really upset, came to the office, and they shot Marks when they really wanted to shoot Sam, but they shot Marks instead. And this is when Sadie and Sam lose contact forever. Sadie gets into this depression, she's pregnant with his kid, and she's really depressed, and they're totally separated. But Sam still wants to feel like how he was when he was playing the games that he was when he was a child. So he makes Pioneers, which is like a farming roleplay kind of townsy game. And it's exactly the type of game that Sadie was playing at this moment, because she wasn't making games at this moment because she was like very depressed. Her almost husband just died, and she was pregnant with this child. She was depressed, and she was taking comfort into video games. And she downloaded Pioneers. She had no contact with Sam, and she played this game, and they ended up role-playing together, and she didn't even know that it was him until like he started dropping hints. And this basically got them reconnected because his grandfather died. She went to the funeral, and then he gave her the Donkey Kong machine that they were playing in his pizza store when they were children. And this basically like kind of reconnected them. It was another rebirth of their relationship. They started, at the very end of the book, they were like, oh, like, you still play games? And he was like, yes, we should make another game. I'll always keep asking you to make games, even if it's not the best decision. And that just, again, states the whole theme of rebirth and starting new.
All right. I basically already talked about the ending, how it establishes a rebirth, replay, modify, and start anew. And it really leaves, it doesn't end with a clear resolution, and it leaves possibilities of what they're going to do next, and the next opportunity, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, the whole name of the game. And yes. And then also, it establishes the other theme of love that I was talking about, how in the end, their relationship lasted the whole book. Yes, there was ups and downs, but in the end, the love of their friendship stayed. And I think that's really powerful. All right, now, moving on to point of view. It's primarily told in third person limited, focused on the point of view of Sam, Sadie, and occasionally Marks, and shifts to a more omniscient viewpoint to offer broader insights. So the reliability of this. I think that the multi-point of view provides a more balanced and more objective view of events because you don't get the bias of only one character retelling or telling about a certain event. And yes, next. Advantages. Now, there's multiple perspectives, so you can learn about their inner thoughts and motivations and what they think about another person. There's just like a more chance for more characterization. And the broader scope of it really provides a background information beyond just one character's experience, like I said before. And yes, it requires it adds a more nuanced portrayal of emotion and conflict. Multiple people are talking about Mark's death and how it really affected them, and it just offers like a more deeper characterization of what they think in the time. And now the purpose of the point of view in the book. I think it reflects the gaming theme quite well. Most games are experienced in different perspectives, and it really reflects the theme of creation, collaboration, and perception in video games, in gaming, game development. And yeah, I think that when you're developing a game, there's multiple perspectives. You have to collaborate. You have to create things. There's multiple ideas flowing, and I think that's really how the book also ebbs and flows. And now it also, the point of view conceals information and by shifting the point of view. So we don't really know what happens if it dramatically shifts to the other character's point of view. And it definitely creates conflict and misunderstandings, and it makes them unfold more gradually. Like the misunderstanding where Sam was staying home because of his injury and he didn't want to tell Sadie because he didn't want to feel weak, and Sadie just thought that he didn't care about unfair games anymore. And so that definitely like conceals information. We didn't really find out that he was was dealing with such pain until after it shifted from Sadie's point of view. So it went Sadie's point of view, Sam is not showing up, he's not even part of the company anymore, we don't even know what he's doing, and then we shift to Sam's point of view, I'm in so much pain, I'm waking up, I'm having night sweats, I'm having phantom pain where I think that my foot is still there. And I think that really just it conceals information until it shifts the point of view, and it creates suspense. And then also shifts to omniscient during Mark's death seat to create a more impactful moment where it's not just one person, it's multiple point of views, and I think that's really interesting. And then the limitations, I think that the third person can create a sense of detachment from characters' emotions. You're not really thinking about one person's emotions, you're thinking of like everything. And then also, again, like how the plot jumps from future and past, the jumping between characters can also create a little bit of confusion. Alright, now lastly, my thematic statement, which is, like the iterative process of developing video games, life does not completely end with failure. Instead, the game over screen one can experience can create opportunity to rise, rebuild, and try again to create a better outcome. And here's my evidence for this. She had thought after Ichigo that she would never have to fail again, that she would never fail again. She had thought she had arrived, but life was always arriving. There was always another gate to pass through, until of course there wasn't. Zevin 228. And I think that this quote really shows that it honestly exhibits the whole theme of the book. She failed with both sides, and she thought that after Ichigo she would never fail again. But when she went to Japan and she was walking through these gates, it was like she was seeing every single moment in her life and how it just keeps on going. No matter what, it will keep on going. You can always start anew after failure, after success. It doesn't matter because tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps into a petty pace from day to day. And then also, and the other quote is, that's a game character's life. A world of infinite restarts. Start at the beginning, this time you might win. Zevin 397. Now, this is a quote from the very, very end of the book. It is basically referencing the time when Sam keeps asking Sadie to make a game, even after they just had this really long fallout. And he's like, "Do you still play games? I think we should play a game to get. I think we should make a game together, even though it's not the best idea. I think that we could start this and we might win. And if we don't, that's okay because we can always start anew. That's a game character's life." And I think that this really draws in the connection between gaming and like how after a end screen, after a game over, after you lose all your lives in a game, you can always restart, and how that's exactly similar to the failures in life. How you can always start anew, how you can always learn. And now the connection of my theme to the big 6 items. Context: the video game era, not much cross review, there's lots of room for failure. Just like in both sides, how it was going to be such a good game, it was going to be such a good game until it hit the crowd and it flopped. And then also LGBTQ representation in games. I think that this also hits the rebirth aspect because I think that people had to kind of get used to it. They had to normalize it, and they really stuck to the idea, even though that it might have caused like an uproar, might have lost some gamers in Maple World, but they kind of stuck to that, and I think that's like really powerful in the context of rebirth, because you can always get more players, you can always change, you can always change your demographics of a game. And then characterization, they grow after each game that they created. Ichigo, they were young, they didn't know that they could fail, basically, and then both sides, they grew after that. They knew what to make. They made Maple World, and then they made Counterpart High, or they made Counterpart High, and then they made Maple World, but whatever, same thing. They learned from both sides, that's the whole point, and they grew from it, and they learned from it. And then also the fallouts between Sam and Sadie, but then second chances. And then point of view. So there's different point of views, and it allows for the in-depth character development that we see between Sadie and Sam, and how they Sam had a really hard time with his foot throughout the novel, and when he got amputated, that was a time of rebirth, and he had to work through his phantom foot pain, but he had this development of like allowing for people to help him, and for people to allowing to know about his injury, and I think that's like another rebirth of his character. All right, now plot. There was multiple setbacks, which kind of conveys the theme exactly, of rebirth, trial, error, starting anew, starting in the ashes of the phoenix, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. There's conflict between Sadie and Sam, Marx's death, and then the rebirth and learning moments of the plot. Now, figurative language, I've touched on this several times, of tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, the Macbeth analogy, or illusion, it's an illusion. And each day is a new start. That's basically all the figurative language that I can come up with this theme connection. And then the setting. Change from East to West Coast symbolize a new beginning, especially concerning Sam's amputation. It's a new start with Unfair Games. They started a new gaming company, which is unlike the indie game setting that they started with in Mark's apartment, where they was just a small group, 3 children, just, well, maybe not children, but young adults, just starting to make a game. And then after Mark dies, Sadie stops gaming and moves back to the East Coast, which is another new beginning. And then that gap bridges, and Sam and Sadie become friends again, and their love for video games kind of brings them back together, and there's another rebirth. But she's in the East Coast now, so there's just like it starts in the East Coast, then they go to the West Coast, and then they go to the East Coast again. It's just like this another cycle of starting anew and starting anew and starting anew. And that's it.